Hello everybody, this is Connor at BoatsDon'tSink here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile. This time we're going to be looking at the Fable Haven deck from BP04, Cosmic Mythos, which has just released this past week. First thing you might be asking, Fable Haven? Again? Yep, we did look at this during our BP03 decks. It was one of the new Haven decks that was sort of introduced in BP03 using Tin Soldier, Alice, Humpty Dumpty, all of those cards. It hasn't changed a whole lot, but I think it is worth looking at before we get too deep into the new decks out of BP04, because it is a deck that you're going to be seeing a lot of. It's a deck that only got a couple upgrades, but they're huge upgrades to the deck. They're going to make it a lot more threatening, a lot harder to deal with. So I wanted to cover it. Hopefully this is a little bit of a shorter one since we've seen most of these cards. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the cards that are in the old deck profile. If you want to watch it, you can go check it out. A link to that will be in the description. You might see it on screen right now as well. As always, before we jump into the deck, this is just meant to be a sort of starting point to build off of. It's not optimized for any kind of meta, any kind of sort of tournament format. You should test it yourself, make any changes that you find necessary. We'll look at some other options at the end, so you should be playing what you feel best with, and go with that. So here's the deck. Lots of 3-ofs, kind of like the deck was before. Most of these cards are the same. We have cut a little bit for some cards that we weren't playing before. Notably, Odette was a card that we weren't playing before. We've cut Sacred Plea. We'll look at those later. Otherwise, it's mostly the same. You can check out the deck log page for this at 32QPE. That will also be in the description. You can see there's only 2 new cards in here, Andromeda and Dark Jean. So we'll sort of cover their roles as we get to them. Evo deck. Basically exactly the same as set 3, which cut 1 Bellringer Angel for 1 Dark Jean. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. So, pretty consistent. Like, you're just playing three of the 2 Evos that you really want to use, basically. So we were playing a really low curve, 15 1-drops, 12 3-drops, 5 2-drops, only 8 cards at 4 and higher. Yeah, 8 cards at 4 and higher, 32 cards at 3 and lower, 25 followers, 6 spells, 9 amulets. That's pretty close to what we had before. We are a little lower on the amulet count because we don't have Sacred Pleas anymore. A little higher on the follower count as a result. This deck is trying to be a little more aggressive than the BP03 version was. Obviously, that deck was still an aggro deck, but this one, now that we have Andromeda, can go even more aggressive, so having those extra followers can be nice. Though they are mostly actually at our top end. We'll take a look at all of our individual cards. So first off, we have Actress Faria. This is a Goblin stat line, great for aggro decks. 1 cost 2/2. It can engage itself to put a Fable counter on a follower on our field. Obviously, main thing we're doing with that is Tin Soldier. Tin Soldier can remove a Fable counter to deal 2 damage to an enemy leader or follower. So essentially that means Actress Faria can just put a Fable counter on your Tin Soldier to deal 2 damage without having to attack. That means she can effectively get past Ward. And doesn't give your opponent a quick timing to potentially use removal or anything like that. So just upside if you're putting counters on her on Tin Soldier instead of attacking. You can also put counters on Princess Snow White for its effect, or Alice in order to move them to something else. Say you have an Alice on board and a Tin Soldier in EX area, you can Faria put the counter on Alice, Alice put the counter on Tin Soldier, etc. That essentially means you're not attacking for 2, but you are getting 2 damage later in the game. Faria can also engage to put a counter the turn you play her, which means she can effectively attack for 2 the turn you play her, if you have a way to get a counter to a Tin Soldier. Andromeda is the new card. The card we play 3 of. It's the most important new card from the set for this deck in particular. Really strong card overall. It's a 1 cost 2/2, so again, Goblin stat line, really good for aggro decks. Helps us just play this early, start chunking in for 2 damage at a time. Effect is Fanfare. For the rest of this turn, your leader and each follower currently on your field, including this one, have this doesn't take ability damage. So ability damage is basically anything that is on card text. You can still take attack damage from being attacked or from attacking into something, but any card text, essentially, you don't take damage from. So, first off, the big thing, our Humpty Dumpty Evolve. On Evolve, it deals 5 damage to each follower on the field, 3 damage to each enemy leader, and then we discard our hand. Previously, this was like a 2-sided board wipe, where you just reset the board state, discard your hand, and 3 your opponent's face. And you would try to set up enough extra resources that, despite discarding your hand, you could continue playing after using a Humpty Dumpty. And use that across the sort of length of the game to keep your opponent's board empty and keep them trying to rebuild. Now that we have Andromeda, this can turn into a 1-sided board wipe. Especially, say a curve like going second, if we're able to Alice on 3, get some stuff in our EX area, and then on 4, play Humpty Dumpty for 3, Andromeda for 1, evolve the Humpty Dumpty. We deal 5 to everything, but our followers don't take damage. So it's a 1-sided board wipe, and then we still get to punch in with any of our guys that were already on board. We get to keep the ones that we played that turn, or that we just have in general, which is going to set our opponent back even further, helps us be more aggressive. Previously, the deck sort of had to balance between committing to board early to push damage, and then deciding when to use Humpty Dumpty, because you didn't want to just lose all of your own stuff for no reason. You wanted to make your opponent work for it first. And, you know, it was really rough to have to Humpty Dumpty early if your opponent was being aggressive, because you would lose not only your hand, but also your board, and kind of have nothing to go with after that. But if Andromeda's letting you keep your board, it's a little more justifiable to pitch your hand early, to just keep punching in on your opponent if you can clear whatever they're doing. So this card is huge. Obviously, the stat line on its own is enough to keep us more aggressive. And the text is just phenomenal with our sort of main game plan here. It also has some synergies with the other new card we've added, Dark Jean, since she also deals 2 damage to each follower on the field, ours and our opponents. That's not as important to stop, since 2 will actually kill a fair number of our followers, but not all of them, pretty much, like Humpty Dumpty will. So this is still a nice little synergy that we have if we need to use it. The other notable thing it's going to do is if we play this and then attack out with some of our followers, it's going to stop any quick timing sort of damage-based removal that our opponent has. Surefire bullets, Serpent Wraths, Fire Chains, anything like that. If we play Andromeda and then attack, those aren't going to do damage, so they're not going to be able to stop our followers from attacking. It's especially useful if you see, you know, say you evolved an Alice last turn, you have a 4/4 Alice. You see that they held up 2 play points. You're like, okay, that's obviously a surefire bullet. That's going to kill my Alice. If you play Andromeda before they get a quick timing, you get that free 4 damage in. They can't kill it with surefire bullet, and it kind of wastes those 2 play points they could have used on anything else. Not entirely relevant, but there's a funny thing you can do against Forest, where if they ever just pass on turn 7, holding up like a Silver Bolt, you can just play Andromeda, and their Silver Bolt just becomes useless, which is hilarious. I don't think we're going to be seeing as much Silver Bolt now, but that is something to keep in mind. Moving into the rest of our 1-drops pretty quick. Bellringer Angel, obviously, just staple for always. It's a ward, helps us block against decks that are trying to pressure us early, which is one of our weaknesses. It draws us a card when it dies, which helps us keep digging for more pieces, helps us refuel our hand after we crack an egg, etc. Just all good. The Evolve for 2. We only play 1 now instead of 2, but on Evolve, deal 2 damage to an enemy follower. Still has ward, still has last words. The 2 damage is always pretty good against aggro decks. It's going to stop your Iron Rot Defenders. It's going to stop your Fire Lizards. It's going to stop like whatever else that you're really worried about just aggroing you out early. But in this set, we did get 2 new Goblin stat lines. So we got Perseus and Sword, and obviously Andromeda and Haven. So just 2 more very relevant cards that Bellringer Angel is going to be able to remove. On like, say you Bellringer Angel turn 1, you can evolve turn 2 to pop these. And just sort of keep your opponent from pressuring you too hard. Dark Offering. This card is just super good in Abyss right now. Or, no, sorry, not Abyss. In Haven right now. I think I'm sacking all of our cards. We're Abyss over here. But no. Really good in Haven. It gives us extra defense for our leader. 3 defense for destroying a card on our own field. And we get to draw a card. This is... Obviously, leader defense right now is getting more and more important. Which is strange for a resource-based game like this. In games like Magic the Gathering, your life total is kind of just a resource that you want to spend willy-nilly because it doesn't matter until you're dead. And there's not a ways to just die out of nowhere. In this game, there are. There's a lot of really fast clocks. There's a lot of cards that can just kill you out of nowhere. Every bit of leader defense matters. You look at playing one Dark Offering to go from 20 to 23, you're now out of range of 3 Fortes killing you. Things like that, right? Like, the math is just really important on every little bit of life you can gain. Dark Offering is a super cheap way to do that. We can use it with a lot of our amulets, and obviously bell ringers. If our opponent swings, we can crack a bell ringer to it, which is going to draw us a card off Dark Offering, draw us a card off bell ringer, gain us extra defense, and, you know, they sort of wasted their attack if they attacked into the bell ringer. We can sack any of our amulets that have more expensive effects to sack themselves after they've had their fanfare effect, which is really just good value if we don't want to pay as many play points into them. And you can use this a lot of times if you're going to have to discard your hand anyway, to, say, Humpty Dumpty. You can play sort of extra followers or extra will to overtakes and just sack them to Dark Offering using any extra play points you have. Even though you're not able to use the cards you're drawing, you're still gaining all that life before you discard the Dark Offerings anyway. So just good card, defensive right now, good against all the aggro decks, good against sort of the burn decks, since you can't really stop their damage as efficiently. You just try to heal out of range of it. Will to Overtake's our last 1-drop. It's another amulet. I guess it's our first amulet of this time. Same card we were playing last time, same reasons it's good. It's Fanfare, look at top 3, put any number on top, put the rest on bottom. You can do those in any order. Or you put on top in any order, then put the rest on bottom in any order. Basically lets us control our draws. Early game, we desperately want to find Andromeda. We desperately want to find Alice. Or we want to find things like Alice's Adventure that search our Alice. Cards like March Hare's Tea Time, they can get us free cards. We really just want to be finding all of these pieces to our setup early. And Will to Overtake can make sure that we're drawing setup cards instead of drawing just dead cards that we don't really want to see until later. You don't particularly want to draw Explosion early. You don't want to draw Dark Jean early. You don't want to draw Pinion Prince early. Because oftentimes those cards aren't good until after you Humpty Dumpty. To sort of start getting you things back or to close out the game. And you would rather see them in your EX area, which this can set up. If you play this, you can, you know, rearrange your cards in a way to where an Alice might hit it off the top next turn to put it in your EX area or something like that. Or you can just bottom any cards you don't want to draw the better cards. You can also pay 2, tap, sack itself, draw a card. It makes for a decent 1-2 curve. It's pretty slow, where you play this on turn 1 and then crack it on turn 2. But if that's the best you've got, it's fine. You can make up for it later. Moving into 2-drops, we actually only have 1 2-drop follower. 2 copies of Princess Snow White. So there's a 2-drop 2/2 ward. Good for just sort of, again, staving off aggressive strategies that are trying to hit us with followers early. It's also a decent curve if you just go like 1-drop 2/2 and then 2-drop 2/2. It's not the worst thing in the world. Fanfare, it gets a Fable counter if it came from hand. If it did not come from hand, it gets +1/+1. And then last words, if it has a Fable counter, it goes to EX area. So this is a card that we can play on turn 2. If our opponent kills it, we get to play it again later. Also really nice with Humpty Dumpty, because if we do have to blow it up, it's a card that we effectively don't lose. It just kind of like goes back to our quote-unquote hand, and we can play it again. Just good synergies with deck. It's a Fable card that we can grab off of all of our effects, so we have fewer misses there. But it's kind of just a low-to-the-ground card that we can play that has some nice synergies. You can use Alice and Faria to put counters on this, even after it's a 3/3, to sort of keep reusing it over and over again. I would only recommend doing that if you don't have a Tin Soldier to put the counters on, though, because Tin Soldier is generally just a better place for those. Alice's Adventure, 2-cost Amulet, search your deck for a Fable card on play. Reveal it, put it in hand. This is perfect. This lets you, especially going second, play this on turn 2, get your Alice on turn 3. It can search you Humpty Dumpty. It can search you even like a Faria to put extra counters on a Tin Soldier if you really need to. Late game, it can search you Pinion Prince. It can search you Explosion to just sort of like board wipe your opponent and chip away at their face. It can do a lot of things. This card's really good to draw, honestly, at most points of the game. So easy 3 of. You can pay 1, tap it, sack it, give a Fable follower on your field rush and assail. This rarely comes up, but not never. There could very well be times that you play an Odette and you need to answer like a standing 4/4 or something. So you can give it rush and assail and pop your opponent's, say Alice, or anything like that. Generally, it's not going to come up, though. This is often a really good like dark offering target to get it off board that way and just turn it into drawing a card. But the fanfare effect is good enough to play this for sure. 3-drop followers. First one we have is Alice, obviously the sort of main frontrunner card of all the Fable archetypes. 3-drop 3/3 fanfare, put a Fable counter on it. Activate ability, you can remove a Fable counter to put a Fable counter on any Fable follower on your field or in EX area. So this is obviously just going to be how we set up 10 soldiers. Again, he can remove a counter to deal 2 to anything, so stacking a bunch of counters on him is often a way that we just shoot our opponent for 6, 8, 10 damage in a turn, and really end the game quickly. Alternatively, you know, early game, you play a 1-drop, play a 2-drop, play a 10 soldier on 3. If they don't answer your 3/4, your turn 4 can be Alice, move the counter to 10 soldier, evolve your Alice, shoot your opponent, hit him for 3. Just a lot of good aggressive curves that way as well. Alice does evolve for 1. We have, yeah, you can put it on, you can put counters on Snow White. We talked about that when we looked at Snow White. Generally don't recommend it, but you know, if you happen to have a Snow White, if you played a turn 2 Snow White and your opponent killed it and that's all you have when you play your Alice, like, yeah, you can put the counter back on it, which is kind of cool. Not as important as 10 soldier though. Alice evolving, that is important. On evolve, look at top 4. Choose up to 2 Fable cards from among them, put them in your EX area, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. This is how we are basically stacking up our hand for after we crack Humpty Dumpty. Since he's going to make us discard our whole hand, we need cards to keep playing. Some of those are going to be our amulets that we already have on board. The rest of them are going to be cards in our EX area, mostly put there by Alice. So this card is super important. We got to see it for our deck to work most of the time. Really good, really important. That's why we play 3. It's usually, it's actually pretty uncommon that you see 3 copies of an evolve of a card in your evolve deck, in any deck, but we have ways to recur this, and it's super important, and you can quite often use 3 in a game, so really good card. We gotta have this one. Humpty Dumpty, the kind of titular card of the deck. A lot of people refer to this deck as Egg Haven, the egg being Humpty Dumpty, of course. 3-drop 3/3 evolves for 0. Everyone should know what this card does. 4/4 on evolve, deal 5 to each follower on the field, deal 3 to each enemy leader, discard your hand. It previously basically reset the board, discarded your hand, 3 to your opponent's face. It was good at being burn damage. It was good at being a board clear. The first one is kind of awkward because you don't like getting rid of your hand, but after you already have no hand, all the rest of them are basically free, which is really cool. But now that we have Andromeda, it's just even more free. A lot of times you get to keep your own board. As I said earlier, the turn 2 play something, turn 3 Alice evolve, turn 4 Humpty Dumpty Andromeda evolve Humpty, and then you have, you know, possibly Alice, Humpty, and Andromeda all on board. You hit your opponent with the Alice, and you know, that's 2 4/4s and a 2/2 that your opponent has to answer, or they're taking 10 damage next turn across all of those. So, really good card. It's even better now. It's going to ruin your day, especially with Andromeda now. So, keep an eye out for this card. Biggest issue with the deck, well, maybe not biggest issue, one of the biggest issues that makes this deck hard to play is figuring out when to Humpty Dumpty. Previously, what I always told people was you want to wait as long as possible to Humpty Dumpty. If you can win the game without ever evolving a Humpty Dumpty, that's what you want to do. Because you do put yourself, you know, even if you're board wiping your opponent, even if you're doing 3 to their face, you are putting yourself sort of on the back foot where you're having to top deck every turn once you discard your hand. Once you discard your hand, you are in a spot where you're more vulnerable. Even if you have good cards in your EX area, that's still probably only an effectively 2 or 3 card hand, and you need to keep drawing good cards, or you'll run out of steam. It's still true here. You can just be a little more aggressive with it than previously because of Andromeda allowing you to keep your board. You don't lose everything when you evolve him. Our other 3-drop follower, Tin Soldier. This guy is really the win condition of the deck, and why I prefer calling it Fable Haven as opposed to just Egg Haven. because I don't think the egg is the only part of this deck. I think Tin Soldier is huge. Fanfare, if he comes in from anywhere other than your hand, put a Fable counter on him, and then you can remove a Fable counter to deal 2 to an enemy follower or leader. 3-4 stat line is good. 3-4 stat line is hard to remove. Flower Princess cannot kill this card. A lot of things cannot kill this card. Surefire Bullet cannot kill this card. Lamplit Training cannot kill this card. This guy is going to take, like, Serpent Wrath, make some noise, Ivy Spellbomb. It's going to take, like, some bigger cost removal that your opponent might not want to spend that early. But if they don't spend it and you have, you know, Faria, Alice, any of that stuff, this guy can start putting out a lot of damage really quick. He's also a good win con in the late game. We have sort of 3 ways to bring him into the field from not our hand. Alice Evolve can put him in the EX area. Pinion Prince Fanfare can put him into EX area and put a counter on him immediately, which means he'll have 2 when he enters. So that's 4 damage, just effect damage immediately. Storm that can't be interacted with. March Hare's Tea Time can put him in from our deck on play with sort of a random chance. Or you can pay 2, sack it, get him out of Cemetery, put him back in play, which is still going to give him the Fable counter, be 2 damage. So lots of ways to sort of just get this guy out of nowhere, start pumping him up, burn our opponent for a lot. This guy will do a lot of your damage, a lot of your games. So honestly, in my opinion, scarier card than Humpty Dumpty even. Explosion is the spell. 3 costs, deal X to each follower on the field and each enemy leader. X is the number of cards named Explosion or Humpty Dumpty in your cemetery, plus 1. So this card is kind of a board wipe. It's pretty bad early. Pay 3, deal 1 to everything is just bad Angelic Barrage. Pay 3, deal 2 to everything is better. Maybe functional, but still not great. Once it's doing 3, 4, 5 damage, 6 damage, you know, if you're doing 5 to your opponent's board and 5 to their face, that's wonderful for 3 damage. It does hit your board as well. That's another reason Andromeda can be good. Andromeda can stop this from damaging your board. If you, say, you know, untap with some dudes, you can go, cool, Andromeda, Explosion, burn your face, pop your board, swing in with my guys. You can't even use quick timing removal on them now. Really good card. I'm a little torn on it just because this card's really bad to draw early. The best thing, if you draw these early, the best thing to do is just, like, pitch them to your Humpty Dumpty Evo, since it's going to start putting him in Cemetery for the next ones. And then your Humpty Dumpty Evo will... previously, he would always kill himself, and you could start counting him toward it. Now he might live, so your opponent has to remove him first. But this is a good way to just close out the game. Good card to search off of Alice's Adventure in the late game, since by the time you're doing that, you know, you'll have enough play points to play them both in the same turn. That can turn Alice's Adventure into effectively like a burn 5 spell, even a burn 4 spell that board wipes your opponent, and can just close the game sometimes if that's all you need. Gives you just extra cards that you can draw that win you the game. March Hare's Tea Time. This card's insane. It's completely RNG. It feels really bad when you miss, but the games that you hit, you just start going so far ahead. 4 cost Amulet, Fanfare. Look at top 5, put a Fable follower from among them that costs 5 or less onto field. Put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. We have some main things that we want to hit with this. Odette and Pinion Prince are our 5-drop Fable followers that we can put in. Hitting them on turn 4 off of this feels nuts. Odette, even if you don't have other followers left on board to pump defense to, having a 4/6 that gains you 2 defense on turn 4 is really nice. Pinion Prince, if you say you played a Tin Soldier turn 3 and they killed it because they didn't want you doing like Alice and burning him a bunch, you March Hare's Tea Time, hit a Pinion Prince, and then put that Tin Soldier back into your EX area with a counter on it. That's insane. You have a 4/5, which is still hard to remove. You have another Tin Soldier set up, ready to go. Just really strong stuff all around. It can also get Alice, which is really good. If you have an Evo point going second, you can March Hare's Tea Time on turn 4, still evolve a Pinion Prince to remove something, still evolve your Alice if you find it. So just, again, really good stuff overall. Has an activated ability as well, as if the card wasn't strong enough. Pay 2, tap, sack this. Select a Fable follower that costs 3 or less in your cemetery and put it onto the field. So we can still get Tin Soldier, obviously, which is a fantastic card to get. We can get Humpty Dumpty if we just need to crack another egg, or we can get Alice if we just need to find more cards to keep us going. This is often a pretty decent thing you can do. If you can play March Hare's Tea Time before you play your first Humpty Dumpty and discard your hand, you can then use March Hare's Tea Time to get an Alice back, which finds you hopefully 2 more cards to allow you to keep playing the game longer. So really consistent way to just keep sort of fueling all of your package afterwards. And if you don't need more card advantage, you know, March Hare's Tea Time has a lot of ways to just turn into extra damage, either through evolving another Humpty Dumpty, getting a 10 soldier, and burning your opponent. Even if you have a 10 soldier already, you can turn it into a Faria or an Alice to put a counter on the 10 soldier you already have. Looking at our 5-drop followers, Odette White Swan. This is a card we didn't play before. I think in the last set deck, it was just a little clunky. You didn't want to draw it early. You really only wanted to hit it off March Hare's Tea Time because it was kind of just worse than the other things you could be doing otherwise. That's kind of still the case here, but I think the healing is a lot more valuable. And I think now, see, before giving +2 defense to each other follower on your field, it turns your Faria to a 4, your Bellringer to a 4, your Snow White to a 4, your Alice to a 4 if it didn't evolve, 6 if it did, which is 6 is relevant. But a lot of your smaller cards didn't get to 5, or didn't get to 6, which meant that Humpty Dumpty still just blew them up when they evolved. Your unevolved Pinion Princes are 5s on their own, so they go to 7, which is pretty hard to answer. But your smaller stuff, again, it died to Humpty Dumpty anyway, so like it wasn't super valuable. But now we have Andromeda, which can mean that, you know, buffing all of our shitters, all of our Farias and stuff to 4 defense, and then playing Andromeda and then evolving a Humpty Dumpty is like, okay, cool. Now we just blew up our opponent's board, and our guys are out of cheap removal range. Like, they're into the realm of like expensive removal to start taking care of them. And last words, it pumps again, which is great. It means that even if our opponent answers it makes the other cards on our board harder to answer. And it gives us a lot of defense, which, as I said earlier, in regards to Dark Offering, leader defense is really important right now. There's a lot of burn decks, a lot of aggro decks, and there's a lot of ways to die that you can't necessarily stop immediately. And your better way is to just heal outside of range of dying to them, instead of trying to stop them as they happen. And 4/6 is a good stat line. Even if you don't have Odette, I'm sorry, not Odette. Even if you don't have Andromeda, Odette does not die to Humpty Dumpty, which is good, very good. Pinion Prince. We did play 3 of this before. Only playing 2 now. I don't hate 3. 3 is, this card's really good to see. It's just fanfare. Put a Fable card from Cemetery into your EX area. Put a Fable counter on it. You may put a Fable counter on it. This gets you extra counters on 10 soldiers, extra counters on Alice's that you can move to 10 soldiers later, etc. It gets you card, so you can get Explosion with this, which obviously isn't going to need the counter. But usually you're either going to get an Alice to spin the wheel again. You can get a Humpty Dumpty if you just need to like blow up the board again, and your Explosions aren't good enough yet. Or you can get 10 soldier, which is sort of the way that you set up your kill turns. If you can ever Pinion Prince into a 10 soldier, that's 2 counters immediately. And then like play an Alice, puts a 3rd counter on it. And then have like a Faria ready or something, right? That's just like 8 damage kind of out of nowhere. Or if you have like a March Hare, you can sack it, get an Alice back, put the 4th counter on it. This guy's a really good way to sort of set up your kill turns. He gets you the exact card you need when you play him. He's also a 5-drop, so we can get him off of March Hare's Tea Time. Evolves for 1 into a 5/6 with Assail. This is just really good at removing things. 5 attack is great. All of the like 5 defense followers that think they're just outside range of like Surefire Bullet or Make Some Noise. Obviously they're still within Serpent Wrath range, but like Pinion Prince gets to kill those. He gets to hit the 5/5s and the 4/5s, which is like Cassiopeia and cards like that. So great there. 6 defense, again, fantastic. It lives Serpent Wrath. It lives our own Humpty Dumpty evolves, even without Andromeda. Lives a lot of things. So this card's good. We play 2 evolves just because we do want it for the removal option, but it's not like super mandatory. It's just nice to have when we do see it. Last follower we play, this is the other new card in the deck, Dark Jean. This is kind of just here as a new finisher option. 6-drop 5/5, so it is the most expensive card in our deck. It can be a little cloggy early. We don't really have any ways to search it. It's not Fable, but if you don't draw it, whatever. If you do draw it, it can just kill your opponent. So Fanfare, deal 2 damage to each other follower on the field. Give each other follower on your field +2 attack. So this is kind of the opposite of Jean. From set 1, Jean dealt damage only to your opponent's followers and then gave yours extra defense. This deals 2 to all followers, which we can stop with Andromeda. And then it buffs all your followers +2 attack, which can be really good like on a kill turn if you ever untap with like 1 or 2 followers and you can buff them 2 attack each. That's 4 extra damage you're doing just from playing this Dark Jean. And then on evolve, Andromeda, obviously we did mention that. On evolve for 1, so 7 play points total. If your leader's defense is at least 5, it only says that so you don't kill yourself. Select an enemy follower on the field. Deal 4 damage to it and each leader. So this does damage yourself. You have to be careful with that, but it's 4 burn damage straight to your opponent's face. And it's 2 to your opponent's board, and then 4 to any single follower. So even a Shenlong, which is 5/6, dies to Dark Jean's just effect text. And then she can still attack once you evolve her for 6 more damage. So there's essentially like no ward that will ever live through Dark Jean. So even if your opponent thinks they can live by, say they can't answer your board, but they can set up a bunch of wards, Dark Jean will clear all of it. And she'll buff your board, and she'll burn your opponent 4 face, and then you can just go in and kill. So nice one of. It's not something we need to see a ton. It's not something we're ever evolving multiple times because we don't want to deal that much damage to ourselves. But it is good at just closing out the game at the very end. The deck as a whole, obviously the pros and cons of the deck are very similar to what they were last time we looked at it. You have a lot of card advantage, a lot of consistency. Alice is getting you 2 cards. Will to Overtake can kind of like cantrip, Bellringer Angels, cards. Alice's Adventure searches you a card. Snow White is recursion. March Hare's Tea Time is a +1 on play that can also turn into another card. Pinion Prince gets whatever you want out of the grave. Tea Time obviously gets whatever you want out of the grave. So lots of just get the exact card you want when you want it. Lots of draw a bunch of cards, or effectively draw a bunch of cards. So really good on the card advantage front. We have a lot of sources of damage that can't be interacted with. Tin Soldier especially, but also Dark Jean, Explosion, Humpty Dumpty. These are all burn damage straight to our opponent's face. It's a really good way to win games that our opponent can't interact with like wards or removal or anything like that. And a one-sided board wipe can swing games big time. Especially decks like Forest that might be going wide. If they're playing a lot of combo cards, they play 3 or 4 cards in a turn, and then you just kill all of them at once. And get to keep your own guys. Previously, you would lose your guys when you did that, but now you get to keep them. You're so far ahead, it's not even funny. You basically can win the game off of that if your opponent doesn't have the right hand to come back from it. Cons of the deck. Still, once you crack a Humpty Dumpty, even though we have a way to stop ourselves from taking all the damage on our followers, we don't have a way to stop discarding our hand. So a lot of the game, once you crack the egg, is still spent playing off the top of your deck. And even when you're not just like actually top decking with no cards in hand, there is still a lot of RNG off the top of your deck with Alice and with March Hare's Tea Time. Those 2 cards can make the deck feel really good or really bad depending on how well you can hit off of them. And that is one of the things I dislike about the deck, is that a lot of your early setup can be very RNG based. And it is weak to early aggression still. Decks that can pressure you to use Humpty Dumpty's Evolve before you're ready to are the ones that are going to beat you. If you have to discard your hand when you don't have an EX area set up or a March Hare's Tea Time set up, it's going to be bad. You're just in top deck mode, and if you draw a card, you draw a Tin Soldier, or you draw an Andromeda with no board, like, you're just doomed. It's really bad for you. Andromeda herself does help that because she does mean that we can crack the egg more aggressively and keep our board to keep pushing. But if the decks can force you to crack it without that, or sometimes even with, if they have answers to your board afterwards, early aggressive decks can punish you pretty hard. Some other cards to look at real quick. Sacred Plea was obviously in the deck beforehand. This is just an amulet that you can play. Basically saves you a card from your Humpty Dumpty evolve, since you have to discard your hand. You can put these down first and then just turn them back into cards afterwards, so you effectively don't have to discard those cards. Pinion Prayer is a way to be a little more aggressive. It's another amulet, which again means it won't die to your Humpty Dumpty, so you can play these out and sort of save them until after you've cracked Humpty Dumpty if you need to. Just makes a 2/2 a Storm. It's a good way to get extra damage in on the opponent in a deck that wants to be aggro. You can play some removal options. Previously in the set 3 deck, we played Surefire Bullet. That is still an option for sure. Cards like Angelic Snipe are good against aggressive decks. Surefire is good against sort of the mid-rangey decks, other Fable decks. Acolyte's Light is good against some of the bigger, not slower, but bigger decks, where damage-based removal might not be good enough. Decks like Forest that are playing King Elephant, that thing's probably swinging at you as like a 6/6 or a 7/7. You might not have any other good removal for that. Acolyte's Light can just get rid of it unconditionally. So, still something to consider. Rapunzel, big aggressive stat line, 3 mana, 4/5. You can play this on 3, play Alice, evolve her on 4, put the Fable counter on this. You have a 4/4 and a 4/5, right? And the 4/5 can attack. This has Ward, which also makes it really good against the aggressive decks because, you know, your Heroic Sword, your Aggro Abyss, all those decks are going to struggle to get through a 4/5 early. It's going to take them multiple bodies, usually, to get through, which saves you a lot of damage to face. It can't attack unless it has Fable counters, but between Alice and Faria, that shouldn't be super difficult in this deck. Even like Pinion Prince if you have to. Amethyst Lion is, again, just another aggressive option here. You can give +1 attack to Bellringer Angel or Snow White with this, which can help you push a little more damage. That part's not going to be as good in this deck as in some others, like the Gemstone deck we covered last time. But he is 2 mana. He gives you a turn 2 play, which we are kind of lacking in this deck. And it has Storm, so pretty good. This is one of the new cards that I would look at for the deck, Staircase to Paradise. This is an amulet from set 4 that I've seen a lot of people talk about this card and just be like really low on it. Really like, why are you playing this? It's so slow. I think this is like one of the few decks where it actually maybe fits in pretty well. It's a 1 mana amulet. So being an amulet, it's not going to die to your Humpty Dumpty. It can come down and just sort of sit there. Whenever a follower is put from your field into a cemetery, put a soul counter on it. Tap, sack, look at top 5, add 2 followers to hand, put the rest on bottom in any order. You can only use this if this has at least 6 soul counters. So since we're an aggro deck, obviously taking turn 1 off and not playing a goblin is kind of not great. But say you go turn 1 goblin, turn 2 goblin this. Every time one of our followers dies, so our Andromedas, our Bellringers, if we Dark Offering a Bellringer, we get a counter on this. If we have to Humpty Dumpty and kill one of our own followers, we get a counter on this. If we play a Tin Soldier, our opponent either kills it and puts a counter on this, or they take a bunch of damage back. And we don't need to crack this early, right? We can save this up as our followers die in the early game. And then after we use Humpty Dumpty and don't have a hand anymore, we can crack this to get 2 followers off of our top 5 back to hand for 0 play points. And that allows us to sort of keep playing the game from there. Dig for cards like Pinion Prince, Dark Jean, that are so good in the late game. The other cool package in this deck is Goblin Princess. So this is a 3-drop 2/1. Fanfare, search your deck for a neutral follower that costs 1 play point and put it onto your field. This can get Bellringer Angel, and it can get Faria, which are both great cards to search out in this deck, especially Faria. You can also just play like 1 copy of Goblin to search with this, which is another 2/2 that can attack in. So it's going to get you a pretty reasonable amount of stats. Say you search a 2/2, you're getting 4/3 of stats for 3. And then you get to evolve for 1 into a 3/2. On evolve, put a Goblin King token into your EX area. Goblin King is a 4-cost 6/6 with Ward. Fanfare, give each other Goblinoid follower on your field +1/+1. So if you turn, say, 3 going second even, play Goblin Princess, get a 2/2 Evo point, you have a 3/2 and a 2/2, and then a 6/6 waiting to play on turn 4. That's a big stat line. 6/6 doesn't die to your own Humpty Dumpty. It doesn't die to basically any removal that at that point in the game, other than like Execution, Fiery Embrace, Acolyte's Light. All the damage-based removal is going to be too small for it. And if your Goblin Princess lives, or maybe even your Goblin that you search out, those are getting even bigger when he enters. And that can chunk for a lot of damage. That can be pretty hard to deal with. So this might actually be a package. Obviously, it's maybe the most, like, is the least space efficient out of all the cards we've looked at to try to fit in. But it, I think, could have some real potential, and is one of the cards I'd like to see tested around with a lot in these Fable Haven decks. You do have to keep in mind, she's not Fable. You can't search her off of any of your stuff. But pretty decent card to draw early. Maybe not even a terrible card to draw late, since it can get you a Faria. Once again, here's the deck. I know I said I was going to try to keep this quick. This might be like my longest one yet, just because I spent so long talking about interactions, but my goodness. This deck's cool. This deck's really important. I think it is important that people know what this deck does. So, here's the deck. Again, you can check out the deck log page at 32QPE. Our Evo deck, full of all old cards and a Dark John. Thank you for watching. Honestly, this was a long one. I didn't mean for it to be. I said at the beginning I was going to keep this short, but set 4, my stuff came in late, so I'm a little late on testing, which is why this is coming out, 5 days after the set, 4 days after the set. But hopefully throughout this week and next week, I'll have a lot of decks coming up. I'm hoping to get some testing done, try out a lot of cool stuff from the set. If you have any ideas you want me to cover, let me know. Comment, like, subscribe, do all that. Until then, there should be some videos on the screen for you to check out. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.